is a perfect lead-in to this evening. I'll be talking about cloth collapse models and how I think that can account for many of the problems, the very, very innate problems that you have in trying to duplicate the body images and the blood marks, and would like to encourage computer simulation of these kinds of models. They're more complicated, but I hope you find that interesting. But it's a great lead-in, and hopefully complements your work. I'm supposed to talk about naturalistic processes for image formation. I've got a whole 15 minutes, so I'm going to get right started. These are just some of the bodily reactions and indicators that a dead human male was wrapped in the Shroud of Turin at the time his body images and blood marks were encoded on this burial cloth. And I'll quickly go over them, but please read them. These, the microscopically precise reactions of at least 100 scourge marks throughout the body containing indented centers and upraised edges with serum surrounding borders that weren't even visible until the late 20th century. The variety of other blood stains that occur with actual wounds and blood flows throughout the front and back of the body, the precise alignment of all the blood marks on the positive images, the arterial and venous blood flows indicating arteries and veins have been pierced in the head, the different types of bruises and swelling identified on the face, the flow of watery fluid from the pleural cavity and of blood from the right auricle, which fills with blood on death, the photographically revealed abrasions on the knee, leg, and across the shoulder blades, the abnormally expanded rib cage indicating asphyxia, the enlarged pectoral or chest muscles drawn in toward the collarbones and arms, consistent with a crucifixion victim pulling himself up just to breathe, the several skeletal features on the fingers and on the spinal column and some on the forehead and the palm. The many signs of rigor mortis throughout both sides of the body, the postmortem bleeding, and the identification of human hemoglobin, human albumin, human whole blood serum, human DNA, and human immunoglobulins from the man's blood marks. And Giulio just emailed us all this week the identification of creatine and ferritin iron nanoparticles that are typical in cases of severely tortured people. These are just some of the human indicators and reactions of a human body. But you also have, of course, you simply have the nearly unanimous conclusion of pathologists, physicians, and anatomists who have studied the Shroud since the beginning of the 20th century, who also concludes this cloth wrapped a dead human being. If a medieval forger were to encode and align all of these features throughout the full-length front and back images of a dead human body as precisely as those seen on the Shroud's positive images, he could have only done this with a human body. If a forger was going to encode the Shroud's blood marks with human hemoglobin, albumin, DNA, immunoglobulins, and whole blood serum at their various borders and within all the blood stains, then he'd have to use human blood on this human body. Notice that the blood marks are uniquely aligned on the man's positive images. This is how the positive images are how the man appeared as he laid in the body at the time of the image encoding event. For this reason, and several other reasons, it means that if human blood marks, it means that the human blood marks on the shroud had to have been inflicted and formed and flowed on the same human body wrapped in the shroud. You can't just take human blood and pour it over some other body. The blood flows that come from this man are the man who received these wounds. Naturalistic processes for image formation obviously can meet this prerequisite or requirement much better than an artistic process for image formation. However, no naturalistic method has ever succeeded or really come close to encoding all of the features found on the shroud's full-length body images or their 130 blood marks. And these include a wide range of naturalistic materials and conditions that have been proposed within these attempts since 1902, really. In general, while artistic methods also fail, they generally do a better job of attempting to duplicate the shroud's body images than do the naturalistic methods. No artistic or naturalistic method has really come close to duplicating the blood marks on the shroud. I've studied most or all of the naturalistic methods proposed to account for the shroud's body images or blood marks over the last 115 years. I'm older than I look. And most of these are discussed in my 2000 book, The Resurrection of the Shroud, and the ones since then in my 2015 book, Test the Shroud. All of these methods have failed in numerous ways, and there certainly isn't time to discuss or analyze their shortcomings, although the books do. But the reader only has to look at the results of these efforts to recognize that they fall well short of duplicating the shroud's body images and their pristine blood marks or all their features. Think of the millions of people that have been bloodied and or buried under a variety of circumstances and covered not only with shrouds, but blankets or sheets or soldiers' uniforms or shirts or trousers, bandages, and you can go on. Yet none have left any images approaching the full-length frontal and dorsal body images on the shroud, or their at least 130 blood marks. There's probably many more. And this question that I just asked you applies to live as well as dead bodies. Bob Rucker is fond of asking audiences how many of them have ever taken a shirt off of a hanger in the closet and noticed that their own body image is imprinted on the inside of the shirt, let alone with all the body image features that the shroud has that Julio mentioned or other lists have got. Natural processes just don't act this way with corpses or living people. And this even includes natural products or processes that are intentionally utilized and controlled by scientists or artists or whoever's proposing a certain hypothesis. The prerequisite or requirement of using a human body who received a series of pre-mortem and post-mortem wounds that formed and flowed over his entire body, it really is a barrier that no artistic method can meet or qualify for. However, this same barrier is proven this prerequisite has proven to be a barrier that naturalistic processes can't begin to overcome. And there's the quandrum that you have. And naturalistic processes, and you can check all the photos and processes in earlier books, but they just don't come close. So there's a quandary that you are. And it's, John Jackson said this probably 25 years ago. In light of all this, it's time that we consider, just continue to follow the evidence on the shroud and consider other methods that might encode features on the shroud and the blood marks. And that's what the cloth collapse hypothesis is doing. And I want to tell you in a later session that a hypothesis that, I call it the historically consistent hypothesis, because it could account for many, I like to think it could account for all the outstanding features that you see on the shroud. So you can consider methods that are beyond our natural ability to do if you want to answer the questions, and that's what we want to do. We want to investigate it. But I don't think we should limit ourselves. We should repeatedly, what's that thing on the Big Bang? This is, it just doesn't make sense to completely keep doing the same thing over and over again that's wrong and get you anywhere. You can consider hypotheses, especially if these hypotheses are consistent with the accounts, say in the Gospels, which happen to be the most attested and reliable sources in ancient history by any objective standard. If you want to look at the number of manuscripts that are still in existence, there's no comparison with any Greek or Roman or contemporary sources. They greatly outnumber them. If you want to look at the closeness to the time of the originals, there's no comparison. If you want to note that they were translated in all the major languages of the day, congruently translated, and that they line up with all the archaeological accounts, things like that, you can consider, and all of these events appear to occur to the man in the shroud, you can consider that it was Jesus's, and that perhaps something involving a disappearing body is a factor in the image encoding event. And that's what the cloth collapse hypothesis attempts to do, and I'll talk about that this evening, but that's everything I wanted to say in my presentation, but I'll be glad to take a question or two. Yes, sir. Oh, okay.
This is kind of a multiple part question. The enshrouded model in the back of the room is bound at the ankles, knees, waist, and neck. Do you assume that this shroud was not bound like that?
Well, it could have been. I don't think it was, and I'm basing my arguments on the cloth modeling of Stirp in the 70s and 80s, particularly when John Jackson subsequently